Hello Tubular Games. We're back for another video. Let's get to it.
So you'll never guess what it's time for. It's time for another ranking video. And today we're going to be talking about the good old Katamari series. And if you don't know the Katamari series, well, you're in for a real treat. It's the series of games where you roll the giant ball around, sucking up everything that you possibly can. Sound familiar? Hopefully it does. It's not only one of the weirdest video game concepts ever, but it's just one of the weirdest video game series, period. While there have been some imitators, there's never really been another series to hit the same way that Katamari has. And so today I'm going to have the pleasure of ranking every Katamari game from worst to best. We're going to be stacking these games up against each other, giving each one of them a little review, not just a plain old ranking and that's it. No, each one of these games is getting a review. I'm going to be sharing my thoughts, feelings, memories, etc. We're going to go over which ones are worth playing and which ones should you skip. Which ones are worth your precious Katamari time. As per usual with my rankings, I won't be covering any phone games. I know there actually are some mobile Katamari games. They are not going to be included in today's list or any JP exclusive ones. But you know what will be included? The latest Katamari title, Once Upon a Katamari. Thanks to GameSite and Bandai Namco, I've been able to sit down and play through this bad boy and I've got quite a bit to say about it. So strap in, get the beef jerky, get the Wendy's spicy nuggets, the popcorn, start going to bed, start the car up, keep grinding away at your 9 to 5, however you're going to watch or listen to this video. It's time to talk some Katamari. I am totally Tubular Jonathan. Hope you're doing well. If you enjoy these types of videos, maybe you should stick around and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. All of the support though is truly greatly appreciated. Seriously, thank you all so very much. Can't wait to talk about some Katamari, so let's get into it. What is the weakest of the Katamari series? And so here we have Touch My Katamari releasing for the Vita in 2012. Despite being the quote-unquote worst Katamari, I still think this game is actually okay. The story is pretty simple. It sees the King of Cosmos doing what he does best, messing shit up, throwing a fit, and then the prince having to go clean up said mess. Now when it comes to the gameplay of Touch My Katamari, it is actually incredibly similar to the other games. See, at this point, I won't lie, the series was getting stale even with fans because just about every game is the same. You roll the Katamari and try to get as big as possible, and you know, it was really novel and fun the first couple times, but by this point on the Vita, people were getting a bit burnt out of the same game with arguably the same levels a lot of the time. And this game, well, this game was no exception. It is very similar to the other games in the Katamari series. In fact, I would say it plays basically identical to the other games in the series. There's only a few small differences here. The control scheme is a little different since it's on the Vita. I mean, I'm not going to say it's great, but it is a little different. You can actually use touch controls, and that's why it's called Touch My Katamari. I'm sure as hell never going to use this. I hate touch controls. And you could actually touch the Katamari to stretch it out, but this doesn't really have much of a gameplay effect outside of a slightly wider radius, and the game never actually takes advantage of this gimmick at all. Then we get to the levels. The levels are nothing special. In fact, most of the levels are actually just reused from previous Katamari games, and this came out after Katamari Forever, which was like a celebration of all the Katamari levels. And so it's like, okay, they're just reusing levels over and over from other Katamari games instead of really creating their own new levels that take advantage of these new gimmicks. There's a couple new levels in this game, but they were all super forgettable and I couldn't even tell you any, and I just played the game not that long ago. And then, right when the game starts to feel like it's getting good, it's over. The game is under 2 hours long. You know, some of these Katamari games are a bit short, but this is really short. Like, wow. I remember when the game came out, people were like, oh, this is a really good starting point if you want to get into the series. And it's like, okay, well, what about the longtime fans? And it's like, they are probably sick of these same levels over and over. And that's kind of how I felt about this game. I was like, okay, it's got like the same levels. It's got a gimmick that doesn't get taken advantage of. It's got fine enough controls. The presentation's fine for the Vita. The music is nothing special and it's better in other Katamari games. What does this game really have going for it? Well, it's Katamari on the go. Oh wait, that's already been done. And now it's been done even better since we have the Switch games, so it's like, yeah, I don't know why you would ever honestly play this game. This is like the only Katamari that I can't recommend. Even if you really love Katamari, I would say it's just really not worth trying. The game is nothing special. It has some really strange DLC also. It's like the game is already crazy short and there's DLC, but you know what? That's a different conversation. I wouldn't say this is an awful game or like a terrible game, but it's just not worth playing. And so here we have Me and My Katamari, releasing initially for the PSP in 2005. This would actually be the first Katamari title without the series creator, who would end up leaving Bandai Namco and going on to go make some very strange games. The story's pretty shrimple in this one as well. It's about the family just trying to take a vacation on an island when the king messes some shit up, causes a tsunami that pretty much devastates a few islands, and so then it's up to the prince to create new land masses. You know, it's not the size of stars or planets, but he still has to create something rather large. And really, I could say that about the gameplay as well. The gameplay plays very similar to the other Katamari games. This game is on a much smaller scale though. Really, there's only one big area in the game, which is the Sunflower Continent, but the time of day and seasons constantly change during missions. But you will frequently see the same areas getting rolled up since there's not a lot of variety here. Now, the controls are actually different from the normal Katamari game because the PSP lacks 2 analog sticks. You'll use the D-pad and the face buttons to control, it's just really weird. Like, I know this is the best they could do with the PSP and the control scheme, but even to this day I thought it's always been just incredibly awkward to control, way more than regular Katamari awkward and strange. Like, this is just really awkward to use. I mean, it's functional, but I'm never going to say I got comfortable or all that used to this control scheme, and I'd rather just, you know, have a regular Katamari control scheme, but obviously that wasn't going to happen. I never really got used to the controls. Now, when it comes to objectives, what you're rolling up, really every level is the same. It's just try to get as big as possible. You know, you start out really small at the beginning, but you start to get bigger and bigger, and then later levels you start a little bigger. You know how this goes. I gotta say, there's really not any other objectives you get in this game. There's no like collect this many objects or try to avoid something. It really is just get big for every single level. And you know, that's always been Katamari's bread and butter, but I kind of did like it when they threw in other objectives besides just get big. At least the sense of progression is pretty decent here. You start really small, and eventually, you know, you get a little bigger, one at a time, a little bigger, and then finally you end up taking the island, and you eventually just kind of take everything by the end of it. I'm not going to say the progression or the pacing was as good as the original games, but it was still pretty decent. And while you do go through really similar areas, at least they're decently designed, and the presentation was actually quite good for the PSP as well. I didn't notice any frame rate issues, which is kind of remarkable. The game also looks decent, and the soundtrack's good because it's just the first 2 games soundtracked together. There's a couple new songs here, but yeah, it's really just the first 2 games together. It's alright. And I could just kind of say that about the game in general, is that it's alright, you know? It doesn't have inherently anything all that wrong with it. I mean, the controls are weird and it can get a little old since you're really only in one big area, but it's still that Katamari gameplay that you know and love. And yeah, it's on a smaller scale and the game's not too long, but it's still a fun time. I'd say if you love Katamari, this is still worth trying. Who knows, maybe in the future this game will get a reroll and then we can all play it on modern consoles. And so here we have beautiful Katamari releasing for the 360 in 2007. Like the title implies, it was indeed beautiful, since it was the first HD Katamari. The story is, you'll never guess it, pretty shrimple. The King of Cosmos is playing tennis with his wife when he has such a hard serve that he actually tears a hole in the fabric of reality and space-time continuum in the universe. And okay, maybe it's not all that, but he does tear a hole in the universe, and it's now up to Prince to rebuild everything once again. The story is as goofy and stupid as ever. In fact, they might really just ride in on how stupid it gets, and they have no problem just making it absolutely ridiculous. This might be the silliest in terms of like the writing that the series has ever seen. Yeah, it's just all kinds of weird. When it comes to the gameplay, it plays incredibly similar to every other Katamari game. How many times am I going to say that in this video? But really, it plays just like the other Katamari games. It has the same control scheme, you know, where it's just weird as hell, and I still don't know why they chose this control scheme all those years ago, and you roll around trying to get bigger and bigger. That's really almost all of the levels in this game, is to just get as big as possible. But there are a few levels where you aren't just trying to get bigger, they do have you collecting stuff, and it's nice that they even had a couple missions where it's not just get as big as possible. When it comes to the environments, it's all actually new here. You go through new levels, there's nothing repeating from other games, which is nice. These new levels are actually quite good, and I like the levels where you aren't just rolling stuff up trying to get as big as possible, like where you're trying to raise a Katamari's temperature to 10,000 degrees Celsius. I actually really like this level, and it really is an interesting twist on the formula. And I think the game could have used more of it. In fact, this game, it's actually quite solid. It just needs more, in my opinion. I think the levels are good, the gameplay is good, the controls are good, the presentation is quite good. Being the first HD game, it looks a little bit better than the other games. Frame rate's fine. The music is good. I'm not going to say it's as good as the previous two games, but it's solid enough. I'd say my biggest complaint is that I just wanted more. The game isn't exactly very long. I finished it in like maybe 3.5 hours. I did like all the levels. You can replay levels. There are some extra modes here, like a time attack or one where you turn the time off. But yeah, I was done with the main game in like 3.5 hours. At least the sense of progression is decent. You know, you start out relatively small and you get bigger and bigger, and by the end of it, you actually do get really big. The last level in particular in this game is great. It is one of the best levels ever in Katamari, where you just get absolutely massive and you end up taking stars, planets, you just go nuts. I love the last level, and I'd say the progression is fun. Something that this game really urged and leaned on was its multiplayer and Xbox Live functionality. You could have 2 players cooperatively go at it on the same screen, or you could go up to 4 players online and go against each other. There were some battle type modes that were really similar to We Love, but you know, you could go online now. And then there were also leaderboards with Xbox Live. And you know what's crazy is that the game actually still goes online. Yeah, this game is like over 10, almost 15 years old, and it still goes online. And what's great is that it's actually playable on modern Xbox consoles. You don't need a 360 to play this. You can actually play it on your Series X or your Xbox One, and you can still play online and still access the leaderboard, so that's pretty cool. There's even DLC for the game, and you can still buy it. You know, the original game was already pretty short. This DLC, it doesn't really add a ton of new levels, but they're fun as well. I gotta say, beautiful Katamari, it's a good time. You know, you can still play it on modern consoles, and the levels are still fun. The game still looks and runs fine. If you have any weighing interest in the series, I think it's worth checking out. Is it as good as some of the other Katamari games? No, but it's still a nice time. And so here we have the original Katamari Damacy, releasing initially for the PS2 in 2004, but it was re-released in 2018 as Katamari Damacy Reroll. When this game originally came out, there really was nothing else like it at the time. People had no idea what to make of it. There had never been anything that played quite like this, that had this kind of control scheme developed by a madman, that had this strange, quirky vibe and atmosphere, and a lot of people were just blown away with how unique this entire experience is. The game was just absolutely all over the place when it came to its gameplay, presentation, story, etc. And all these years later, yeah, it's still all over the place, and there really hasn't been another game to have a similar tone to the original Katamari Damacy. The story's pretty simple. It sees you play as the prince, who is the son of the king of all cosmos, who is supposed to look over said cosmos, but ends up just completely ruining everything, and so it's up to the prince to rebuild the stars, constellation, and moon, and really just kind of, I guess, save the universe in that sense. And how does he do this? By rolling stuff up to make the stars and moon and all of that. So that's the plot. I mean, it's about as wacky as it gets. Like, the story's really wacky. Even the first Katamari was just really out there when it came to its story, and I love it. I really do love the game's tone, just how silly and goofy it is, how nonsensical parts of it are, and to this day it's still great. There's really nothing else like it. Now, I remember playing this game way back when and actually just being totally in love with it, but never finishing it. I didn't finish it until I got it on the Switch in 2018, and I played through this game a couple times now, and you know, it doesn't matter if it's my first, second, third, or even like fifth playthrough. I just love Katamari Damacy. The original game is still so much fun, and it still does feel like a breath of fresh air, even when compared to the other Katamaris that didn't really improve too much on the formula. Sometimes, you know, other games just don't hit like that first one did. In this first game, it just hit really good. You know, that gameplay loop just really hit me, where all you really are doing is just rolling stuff up and you try to get bigger and bigger, and every level for the most part is just get as big as possible. There are some other levels where you have a different objective, like you have to get so much of something, or you want your Katamari to be primarily this object or this type, and I think that it's good that there is some variety here other than just make a star, which is where you just try to get as big as possible. I've always enjoyed when they throw some variety in here, and I think this game is actually really well paced, and I think the progression is actually arguably like the best of the whole series. It's one of the best in the series when it comes to its progression, where you do start as small as an ant. Seriously, you start as small as an ant and you eventually get pretty decently big. You know, you're not taking over the entire planet like beautiful Katamari, but you do get to a decent size, and I think that the way the game scales up is quite nice. Well, there's a reason that this game has had so many sequels that all play incredibly similar to this original game, and that's because the formula works and it's fun. Like, this game, above all else, is just a fun time. Like, I've never not had a great time with this game. The levels are well designed, all of them are well designed, I will add. I like the variety, the progression, the presentation is great. For the PS2, this game looked and ran really well, actually, and then the music is just legendary, whether it's that iconic theme or just the music that plays in the levels. Like, it is all gold, it is fantastic. I have nothing but high praise for the soundtrack of Katamari Damacy. I could say the same thing really about the whole game, because it's just a really solid time. It's not the longest game, it's like 4, maybe 5 hours. There is some little extras in the re-roll edition, but if you don't know where to start or you've never played a Katamari game, I really think you should start with the original. It's aged really well, it's still a great time, and it's widely accessible on modern consoles. I have no problem saying check out Katamari Damacy. The original game is a ton of fun, and the only reason it's not higher on this list is I think the other games are just a little bit better. And so here we have Katamari Forever releasing for the PS3 in 2009. Now in Japan, this game is actually called Katamari Damacy Tribute, and I think that's a much more accurate name. So essentially what this game is a compilation, amalgamation, I got bars here, of all of the previous Katamari games. When it comes to the game's story, there's two parts to it. There's the King of all Cosmos, who gets knocked in the head and suffers from amnesia, and so it's up to the prince to restore his memories by basically replaying old levels. And then there's also Robo King, who is made by Prince and his cousins, who destroys all the stars, just like the regular king would, only he actually feels remorseful about it. And so, you know, you just gotta rebuild everything, because that's just how these games always go. Now, Katamari Forever, it does contain 34 stages. However, 31 of those stages are actually stages from the previous Katamari games. All of the old Katamari games, really. There are 3 new stages here, and I'll be real, these 3 stages are really nothing special. So the game really is just all of the previous Katamari games put together. And you know, I know a lot of people at this point were kind of tired of Katamari having the same gameplay formula over and over, but if you're comparing all of these games, I mean, Katamari Forever would be one of the best by default, since it has like the most stages, since it's all the games put together. It also has a totally different art style. It's like cel shaded, and it actually looks really interesting. There aren't many games that look like this, especially from the PS3 era. I think it looks really cool. Unfortunately, the presentation isn't amazing in this game though, and that's for one reason: the frame rate. The frame rate in this game is not great. It struggles to be at 30. Sometimes it does get down to the single digits. Like, it really can chug at times, and it becomes very noticeable. It doesn't like ruin the gameplay, but it's just very noticeable, and it makes me kind of scratch my head too, because I don't think the game looks that much better than, say, beautiful Katamari, which ran perfectly fine. I mean, you pick a lot of shit up, but like, the frame rate's never really been an issue in Katamari, so I don't know why it is one here. The music I also thought was just not as good as the other ones. A lot of it's remixed, and I don't really care for these remixes, actually. Don't get me wrong, it's still alright, but other Katamaris I think are better in that sense. This game though, what it does have going for it, like I said, is the content. It has a ton of stages, it has a lot of the best stages from the previous Katamari games, and it's still a blast to play. The controls are good, you can actually jump now, which I kind of forgot you could even do, honestly. There's a good amount of variety. The game's got a great length to it. It's probably the longest Katamari game of them all, taking well over like 8 or 9 hours to finish. There's no online multiplayer, but there is local, and there is leaderboards that still are up, which is funny enough. And the game really feels like a best of Katamari. But I will say, if you've already played all the previous Katamari games, you know, you played the original, you played We Love, and you played Beautiful, you don't really need to play this game. You've kind of already played it, and so that's one reason why I don't have it at the top. Another reason is that the progression and the pacing of this game are kind of all over the place, since it's just a bunch of levels thrown together. I feel like it isn't super great in its progression. Like some levels you start out small, some levels you start out big. It doesn't really go from you being an ant to being giant. It just, again, kind of goes all over the place. Like they throw beautiful Katamari's final level where you just become giant, like not at the very end, and then you aren't super giant after that, and it's like, huh. Alright, I feel like I've been pretty negative with this game, but don't get it twisted. This game is still an incredibly fun time, and if you have never played any Katamari, I mean, low-key, this is the best of all of them put together, so there is still that going for it, and it still is a really great time. I mean, Katamari is still fun. Even with this game's flaws, I still have no problem recommending it, especially if you still have your PS3, and the game is a good time for Katamari fans. But I think it just barely misses the mark on being the very best one. And so here we have the latest Katamari, Once Upon a Katamari, releasing here in 2025. Outside of some mobile titles, this is the first new Katamari game in over 13 years, and I'm so glad that this series is back. It really doesn't feel like they skipped a beat here. Despite it being so many years later, it very much is the Katamari you know and love. The story is just as ridiculous as it's always been, where the royal family is clearing their house and the king finds this weird scroll. He starts playing with it, eventually it flies into space and destroys all of the stars and Earth. And so it's up to the prince to once again roll some Katamaris to restore the sky, but this time he's going to be traveling across time. Why? Because that's what the game wants you to do. Like the other Katamaris, it's goofy, it's whimsical, it's silly, it breaks the fourth wall, it's constantly referencing things in the real world and memes. In fact, the game just memes on you regularly, and it feels completely in line with the rest of the series. So, they nailed the story, the vibe, and the atmosphere, but did they nail the gameplay? Oh, you know they nailed the gameplay here. This is Katamari gameplay at its finest. The core moment-to-moment gameplay is pretty much the same that it's always been. You're dropped into these environments and you're trying to get bigger. Sometimes you're looking for specific things like food or mummies or animals. Sometimes you can only pick up so many things. Sometimes you got a pretty strict time limit. At the end of the day, you're just picking shit up with this ball and it feels great. The controls, physics, and feel are arguably the best they've ever been in the series. They didn't feel loose or all over the place. No, I had total control over the Katamari, and what's great is that they not only left the original control scheme in, you know, the weird one with the dual analog sticks, but they also introduced this new one that's titled Simple Controls, and this actually is pretty newcomer friendly. And I think it's really great that they give that option. It makes it a lot more accessible to people who haven't been playing Katamari for 20 plus years like I have, because there's something wrong with me. And there probably is something wrong with me, because I find this gameplay to still be wildly enjoyable all these years later. Yeah, it really isn't that different from the other games, but it doesn't really need to be. If you're somebody that likes the other Katamari games, I can just tell you right now, you're going to enjoy this one. Similarly, if you've never liked Katamari, this isn't going to change your mind. There really isn't a lot of changes here. There are now some power-ups that show up in these levels, but these don't really change much or add all that much to the gameplay, honestly. There's some collectibles, which there were collectibles in the other Katamari games, but one of them is actually required to get through the game now, these king tokens, but there's more than enough in the game, especially if you're doing some of the optional levels. While you can just make a beeline through the main story, there's actually tons of optional levels to do in this game, and if you do even some of the optional levels, you'll have more than enough of these king tokens to get through it, and it's actually worth doing these because they're about as enjoyable as the main game. The levels in general are pretty good. While some of them do have a little bit of deja vu with other Katamari games, there's enough new and original ones here that it makes for a fun, varied experience. And you'll go to a bunch of different environments. Since you're traveling through time, you'll actually go through several different areas. Each area is a little world map that you get to walk around in. They all feel different from each other. They all have their own little gimmicks, quirks, and unique objects to pick up with the Katamari, and I think these are all pretty cool. My favorite was either the prehistoric era or the American frontier. Both of these were pretty charming. The game in general is just rather charming. But what I'm trying to say is I was picking up what this game was putting down. Something else that I was picking up, something that I was smelling that it's cooking, is this game's presentation. I love how this game looks. It very much looks like the original two Katamari games, which didn't even look great for the time. But at this point in today's day and age, it's clearly a very deliberate throwback to the older Katamari games, and you know what? I love it. I love this aesthetic, I love the vibe, and I like how different it looks from legit anything else on the market these days. I'm sure plenty of people are going to look at this and go, that looks like a PS2 game, what the hell? And you know what? You'd be right, it absolutely does, and that's kind of the point. I like that it's a throwback. I'm sure it's not going to be for everybody, but I was loving this. And arguably the most important thing about the presentation, the frame rate is rock solid the entire time. And I'm sure it's a lot easier to do that when you have these retro graphics. I wouldn't be surprised though if people call this maybe the ugliest game of 2025, but hey, I love it. Something else that I love is the music. The music is so good in this game. This is some of the best music the Katamari franchise has ever had. Like, it is stupid good in this game. The main theme is incredible. There's so many amazing tracks. There's tons of great remixes. I missed Katamari music. Like, this shit is so good. They didn't just cook here, it stewed also. Like, this shit bangs, it bops, it slaps, it does all the right things. It feels like this game in general does all the right things for a Katamari game. There's variety, there's actually tons of replayability, there's multiplayer, probably the best multiplayer the series has ever had. The Katamari races show up in the single player, there's tons of levels here. This is arguably the biggest and longest Katamari game to date. It's exactly what the series needed all these years later. It really is a modern Katamari game, and that's all I ever could have wanted. Yeah, I'm sure there are going to be plenty of people who are like, man, this doesn't move the series forward at all. Man, this is just the same as the PS2 games. Yeah, in a way it is, but there's always going to be, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it's also been so long since we had a Katamari game, a new one that is, that this honestly feels a bit refreshing. It's very different from everything else out on the market right now, and I think it's a great game. I have no problem recommending this to anybody looking for something different, or if you've ever been a fan of Katamari. They're not releasing this game at $60, $70, $80. No, it's a pretty budget title, and I totally think it's worth the price point. If you want to know more thoughts on this, I actually did do a separate 15-minute review, so that might be worth checking out. Either way, I think this game is totally worth it, and I loved it. And another big thank you to Bandai Namco for hooking me up with a review code. Absolute dream come true. It's a good thing the game's actually good. And then here we have We Love Katamari, originally releasing for the PS2 in 2005, but getting the reroll treatment in 2023. Now, I always kind of low-key thought We Love Katamari was like the best of the Katamari games, but after playing this new reroll version, it's not even close for me. This is the best of the Katamari games. The game actually expands on the original Katamari and does expand some of the ideas that the original Katamari game had, and it has some really unique levels to it that I think are some of the best, if not the best levels of the whole series. The story's really weird. It takes place after Katamari Damacy, where the game just goes meta and is like, yep, the game sold well and people like the game and they like the king and they love the prince, and so they just want more of it. They want to see more of it. They want to see you make more stars, and so that's what you do, and you gotta just please the fans, really. You walk around this map now and you just, do what the people ask, and a lot of the time they'll do more than just say, hey, can you make a Katamari as big as possible? They will have you do other objectives here and put you in some really interesting scenarios, like this one where you're with a bunch of race cars and you actually move really fast, and you still got to try to get big, but it's a new challenge, it's something different, and I think that We Love Katamari has probably the best variety of all the Katamari games, even more so than Katamari Forever, since so many of those levels really are just get bigger. I think the progression is, again, the best in the series. You start out small, you get bigger and bigger. You don't start out too small here. You start out a good size and you continue to get bigger and bigger, eventually, coming actually really big. And I really enjoyed my time with this game. I enjoyed my time with the original on PS2, and this new version, it's great. It controls really well. It is the best and smoothest controls of any of the Katamari games, not even close for me. The controls still feel like they're designed by a madman, but they actually are really smooth in this game, more so than even Katamari Forever on PS3. Presentation wise, this game is excellent. Also, it looks great, it sounds great, it runs well on the computer too, which is always a plus. It has great music to it. Some of it is a little repeated from the first game, but I love the music in this game. I think the presentation is swell, the gameplay is great. It is really the best gameplay that the series has ever seen. It's not totally different from the other games. They didn't reinvent the wheel, or Katamari, I guess. In fact, they barely changed it at all. They just kind of refined it and put in some really great levels and interesting scenarios to make the game engaging, fun, a good time, and most importantly, enjoyable. I think it's great that all these years later, this game is still a blast to play. Like, I booted this game up like it was the 2000s and was like, oh my gosh, I'm still having a ton of fun with this game. It really doesn't matter how long it's been. This game is always going to be a blast and a breath of fresh air with its weird-ass story, characters, music, all of that. This game even has new levels. The reroll version has new levels where you play as the king when he was the size of the prince. And these are actually challenging, they're interesting, and I think they're decently well designed. Sure, they reuse environments and items from other levels, but I mean, they remix it in a way that it definitely feels new. I was kind of worried that they were going to be just throwaway levels, but they're actually not. There isn't too many of them, but they're fun also. Really, this game, I got nothing else to say other than it's a blast. If you're going to play any Katamari game on this list, well, I would recommend a couple of them actually, as I did have fun with just about every Katamari game here, but I would think the best is We Love Katamari Reroll. It's the newest, it's the greatest, it's the latest, but it really is the best. But that's just my opinion. Everyone has their own opinion. If you haven't played Katamari yet, I really don't know what you're waiting for. If you made it to this part of the video, just go try it. You know, you can get Katamari Damacy Reroll for really cheap, and We Love Katamari Reroll is also pretty cheap. It's like 30 bucks full price, which, how many games release these days 30 bucks full price? Come on now, remake, re-release or not. I think everybody should try Katamari before they die. Just try it. You know, you might not like it, might not be for you, but I think you should try it. I just love Katamari to death and will be a lifetime fan. It does not matter how old I am or how old these games are. They're going to be a blast. I'm just shilling at this point, so I'm going to stop. Hope you enjoyed the video. Like, share, sub, comment, all that great stuff. Let me know your favorite Katamari. If you made it to this part of the video, comment bricks as in what you used to build the house, and the Katamari's coming to pick them up. So, see ya. Bye-bye.